The EXIL and return. The Galactic Assembly Chamber fell silent as the final vote was tallied. High Counselor Verix, a towering Meldorian with iridescent scales that rippled with each breath, stood at the center dais overlooking the gathered representatives of 200 spacefaring civilizations. The decision is final, Verix announced, his multi-tone voice resonating through the massive chamber. By majority consensus, the species known as humanity is deemed too dangerous for continued participation in galactic affairs. Ambassador Sarah Chen, the last human representative allowed in the assembly, stood defiant despite the crushing weight of the moment. You condemn my entire species based on fear of what we might become, not what we are. Verix's secondary eyes narrowed. Your species advances too rapidly. You adapt too quickly. You wage war upon yourselves with ferocity unmatched by any civilized race. The Assembly has observed humanity for merely 3 centuries since your discovery, and in that time, you have developed technologies that took other species millennia to perfect. That's called innovation, Chen argued, her voice steady despite the burning rage behind it. It's not a crime. It is when coupled with your biological predisposition toward violence, countered Regent Tolva of the Ashkari worlds. Humans are the only known species to have nearly destroyed their homeworld multiple times before achieving spaceflight. Your histories are written in blood. The chamber hummed with murmurs of agreement. Ambassador Chen looked around at the faces of the different species, some mammalian, others reptilian, insectoid, or forms defying human classification, and saw nothing but fear and determination in their alien expressions. What is to be our sentence? She asked finally. Not extinction, Verix replied. We are not barbarians. The human colonies will be relocated to the outer void, the unmapped regions beyond the epsilon boundary. You will have supplies enough for initial survival. What happens after is no longer our concern. Chen's laugh was hollow. You call it mercy, but you're sending us to die slowly instead of quickly. The decision is made, Verix said flatly. The relocation begins tomorrow. The relocation was clinical in its execution. Over the course of a single galactic standard year, all 17 human colonies were systematically evacuated. Nearly 9 billion humans were loaded onto massive transport vessels, along with minimal supplies and equipment. The flotilla of colony ships was then escorted to the edge of known space, beyond the safety of mapped hyperspace routes, beyond the protection of galactic law. Admiral Mikhail Volkov stood on the command deck of the flagship Endurance, watching as the last assembly escort ship disappeared into the void. Behind him, the representatives of Earth's former governments waited in tense silence. They're gone, his XO confirmed. No signs of surveillance drones either. We're truly on our own. Volkov turned to face the assembled leaders. Well then, shall we begin? Former UN Secretary-General Amara Okafor stepped forward. Begin what exactly, Admiral? We have supplies for perhaps 2 years if carefully rationed. Our ships are colony vessels, not exploration craft. We don't even know if there are habitable worlds in this sector. Then we will make worlds habitable, Volkov replied, his Russian accent thickening with emotion. We were not sent here to die, Secretary General. We were sent here because they fear what we might become. His weathered face broke into a grim smile. So let us become exactly what they fear. 376 years later, the Galactic Assembly had all but forgotten humanity. The exile had become little more than a historical footnote, an example of the Assembly's mercy in choosing relocation over extinction for a problematic species. In the Grand Assembly Chamber, not so different from the one where humanity had been condemned centuries before, the current crisis dominated all discussion. The hegemony advances unchecked through Sector 87, reported Fleet Commander Ziv of the Calixi Federation. The holographic display showed a spreading darkness, systems falling one by one to an aggressive coalition of species from a neighboring galaxy. 3 more worlds lost this month alone. High Counselor Nexar, a descendant of Verix's line, shook his massive head. Our combined fleets have proven ineffective against their quantum displacement technology. They simply phase through our defensive lines. Perhaps negotiation, began one representative, only to be cut off by derisive sounds from around the chamber. The hegemony does not negotiate, said Commander Ziv. They consume. They assimilate what they find useful and destroy the rest. This is an existential threat to all assembly species. The debate raged on, strategies proposed and discarded, until a junior communications officer burst into the chamber, a shocking breach of protocol that instantly silenced the assembly. Forgive the interruption, the officer said, mandibles clicking in agitation, but we've received an emergency transmission from Outpost Delta 9. They're under attack. Delta 9. That's at the edge of the Epsilon boundary. Someone noted. The officer nodded. The hegemony has broken through. But there's something else. The main display activated, showing grainy footage from the outpost. Hegemony warships, with their distinctive black crystalline structures, surrounded the small assembly station. But then, emerging from the darkness of space, came other ships, sleek, gunmetal gray vessels with blue energy signatures, unlike anything the assembly had seen before. Unknown vessels, came a panicked voice over the transmission. Hundreds of them. They're engaging the hegemony forces. The assembly watched in stunned silence as the unknown fleet moved with impossible coordination, their weapons cutting through hegemony shields as if they were tissue paper. Within minutes, the hegemony attackers were reduced to drifting debris. Who are they? Whispered Counselor Nexer. An unknown species. The final moments of the transmission showed a clear image of one of the mysterious vessels as it passed near the outpost cameras. Emblazoned on its hull was a symbol that made the blood of every assembly member run cold, the stylized outline of Earth, surrounded by stars. Humanity had returned. Admiral Elena Reyes stood on the bridge of the UES Reckoning, flagship of the 7th Fleet of the United Earth Systems. At 53, she was relatively young for such a command, but age worked differently for humans now. Genetic modifications had extended both lifespan and vitality, one of many adaptations humanity had embraced in their exile. All hegemony forces neutralized, Admiral, reported Captain James Chen, her XO and descendant of the last human ambassador to the Assembly. Assembly Outpost Delta 9 is secure. Minimal structural damage. Reyes nodded. Open a channel to the outpost. The communications officer complied, and soon the image of a startled Pesharan station commander appeared on screen. The insectoid's compound eyes widened at the sight of Reyes. Clearly human, yet somehow more than the humans of legend. This is Admiral Elena Reyes of the United Earth Systems. Your station is now under our protection. The Pesharan's translator struggled to convert the being's clicks and whistles. You are human. We are, Reyes confirmed. And we've been watching the hegemony's advance with great interest. But how? The Epsilon boundary. Nothing could survive there. Reyes smiled, though there was little warmth in it. You'd be surprised what humanity can survive when properly motivated. The Assembly's uninhabitable wasteland turned out to be quite rich in resources once we developed the technology to access them. The Assembly must be informed, the station commander said urgently. They're about to be, Reyes replied. Captain Chen, prepare a transmission to the Galactic Assembly. Inform them that after 376 years of exile, humanity requests an audience. As Chen carried out the order, Reyes gazed out at the stars visible through the view screen. The Assembly had cast humanity out, expecting them to wither and die in the darkness. Instead, they had thrived. The harsh conditions of the outer void had forced innovation at an unprecedented rate. Without the Assembly's restrictions on AI development, genetic modification, and quantum mechanics, humanity had made technological leaps that would have taken millennia under Assembly oversight. What had begun as a scattered collection of desperate colonies had unified into the United Earth Systems, spanning over 300 worlds within the outer void. Their fleet now numbered in the thousands, their population in the hundreds of billions. And they had been watching, always watching, as their former jailers faced a threat they could not comprehend, let alone defeat. "Transmission ready, Admiral," Chen reported. Reyes straightened her uniform, midnight blue with the Earth emblem prominently displayed. "Send it, along with our complete tactical assessment of the hegemony threat. Let's see if the assembly is prepared to accept help from the monsters they created." The message streaked across space toward the heart of assembly territory. Humanity had returned to the galactic stage, not as supplicants, but as saviors. And the galaxy would never be the same again. The Reikoning. The Galactic Assembly Chamber had never seemed so small. Over 800 representatives from the member species sat in stunned silence as the holographic display showed the human fleet in formation around Outpost Delta 9. What had once been the Assembly's furthest monitoring station now served as humanity's beachhead into their former captors' territory. High Counselor Nexer's scales had paled to a sickly greenish hue. 376 years, he muttered. "We thought them dead or reduced to primitive colonies struggling to survive." "Evidently not," replied Commander Ziv, whose analytical mind was already calculating the military implications. "Those ships display technology far beyond our current capabilities. Their energy signatures suggest power sources we've only theorized about." The chamber doors parted with a hiss, admitting a small delegation of humans. 5 figures clad in the midnight blue uniforms of the United Earth Systems. At their head walked Admiral Elena Reyes, her posture straight and commanding, her dark eyes taking in the assembled representatives with cool assessment. Beside her walked Captain James Chen, the spitting image of his ancestor who had stood in this very chamber as humanity was sentenced to exile. The symbolism was lost on no one. The Assembly recognizes Admiral Elena Reyes of the United Earth Systems, announced Nexer, stumbling slightly over the unfamiliar name. Reyes stepped forward, her voice clear and carrying to all corners of the vast chamber. "I speak for humanity and all its colonies across the outer void. We come not in vengeance, though perhaps we would be justified in seeking it." Murmurs spread through the chamber, many representatives shifting uncomfortably. Instead, Reyes continued, "We come with a warning and an offer. The hegemony that now threatens your worlds is not unknown to us. We encountered their scout vessels nearly 50 years ago and have been fighting a shadow war against their advanced elements ever since." "Impossible," interjected a Xendari representative. "Our long-range scans have only detected hegemony activity within the last decade." Reyes smiled thinly. "The outer void extends much further than you ever mapped, Representative. The hegemony approached from beyond even our territories first. We've been their buffer, unknowingly protecting you for decades." The revelation sent another wave of whispers through the chamber. "If what you say is true," said Nexer carefully, "then why reveal yourselves now? Why not remain in your empire beyond our borders?" "Because the hegemony has changed tactics," Chen answered, stepping forward. "Their primary fleet now bypasses the outer void entirely. The forces you've encountered so far are merely their vanguard. According to our intelligence, they will strike the Assembly core worlds within 6 months, with a force 10 times what you've seen." Panic erupted in the chamber. Nexer pounded his ceremonial staff for order, but the representatives continued their frantic discussions. Many were already transmitting to their homeworlds, warning of the impending crisis. "Silence," roared Reyes, her voice amplified by some unseen technology. The chamber fell instantly quiet, all eyes turning back to the human delegation. "The hegemony can be defeated," she continued more calmly. "We've been studying them for decades. We understand their phase technology, their hive consciousness, their strategic patterns. But we cannot stop them alone, not now that they've divided their forces." Nexer's inner eyelids flickered, a sign of deep thought among his species. "You propose an alliance, after what we did to humanity." "Not an alliance," corrected Reyes. "A reckoning." She gestured, and Chen activated a holographic projector. Above them materialized the image of a massive space station, unlike anything the assembly had ever seen. A sprawling structure of interlocking rings surrounding an artificial star. This is Nexus Station, the heart of the United Earth Systems Defense Network. From here, we coordinate our entire military apparatus across 300 worlds. We propose to integrate the assembly fleets into our command structure. Your ships will be retrofitted with our phase counter technology. Your crews will train alongside ours. And together, we will stop the hegemony. And the price for this? Generosity, asked a Tessellary diplomat, their crystalline form refracting light as they moved forward. Recognition, replied Reyes simply. The Assembly formally acknowledges the United Earth Systems as the sovereign power of the outer void and all territories we've claimed within it. Non-aggression treaties between all Assembly worlds and the UEAs. Open borders for trade and cultural exchange. That seems reasonable, admitted Nexer, though his tone suggested surprise at the modesty of the demands. I wasn't finished, said Reyes, her expression hardening. The Assembly will also formally apologize for the exile of humanity and the species who most vocally supported our banishment. The Meldorians, Ashkari, and Zendari will pay reparations in the form of technology exchanges and resource grants to human colony worlds still struggling with the aftereffects of forced relocation. This caused an uproar from the named species representatives. The Zendari delegate rose from his seat, vibratory appendages trembling with indignation. You dare to demand payment for a decision made centuries ago. None here were even alive when that judgment was passed. And yet you benefit from it every day, countered Chen. Your species annexed 3 former human colony worlds after our exile. Worlds that thrived under your control while our people starved trying to make barren rocks habitable. The Zendari had no response to this, sinking back into his seat. Nexer looked around the chamber, seeing the fear and uncertainty in his fellow representatives. Admiral Reyes, your terms are difficult, but the threat you describe leaves us little choice. The Assembly must confer. Reyes nodded. You have 24 hours. After that, my fleet returns to outer void space to prepare our defenses. Make no mistake, with or without you, humanity will survive the hegemony. The question is whether the Assembly will. 23 hours later, Reyes stood in what had once been the private chambers of the High Counselor, now converted to a secure meeting room. Across from her sat Nexer and the leaders of the Assembly's 5 most powerful member species. Their earlier panic had given way to a grim resignation. We agree to your terms, Nexer said without preamble. The Assembly will formally recognize the United Earth Systems and issue the apology you require. The named species have also agreed to the reparations, though the exact terms will need negotiation. Reyes nodded. Acceptable. Captain Chen will oversee those discussions. There is one condition, added Nexer. We want observers embedded within your command structure, not to interfere, but to learn. If humanity has indeed advanced as far as you claim, there is much the Assembly could gain from cooperation. Agreed, said Reyes after a moment's consideration. But they will have no authority over human forces. Understood. Nexer hesitated, then asked the question that had clearly been bothering him. Admiral, I must know, how did humanity not only survive but thrive in the outer void? Our scientists calculated a 97% chance of extinction within 3 generations. Reyes smiled, this time with genuine amusement. Counselor, if there's one thing humans excel at, it's defying the odds. The outer void was harsh, yes. We lost millions in those first decades. But adversity has always been humanity's greatest teacher. She walked to the viewport, gazing out at the Assembly's gleaming capital planet below. When we had no habitable worlds, we built artificial habitats. When resources were scarce, we developed matter-convergent technology. When radiation storms threatened our colonies, we modified our genetics to adapt. Turning back to face the Assembly leaders, she continued. Each crisis forced innovation. Without the assembly's restrictions, we pursued technologies your people had abandoned as too dangerous or unpredictable. Artificial intelligence, consciousness transfer, quantum engineering on a stellar scale. These are forbidden technologies, whispered one of the other leaders. By your laws, not ours, replied Reyes. And now they may save us all. Nexer looked troubled. And after the hegemony is defeated, what then? Will humanity be content to remain in the outer void, or do you harbor ambitions of expansion? The question hung in the air. The unspoken fear evident. Had the assembly created exactly the monster they had feared humanity would become? The United Earth Systems has no interest in conquering assembly space, Rice said firmly. Our territories are vast and still largely undeveloped. But make no mistake, we will never again allow ourselves to be vulnerable. The exile taught us that we can rely only on ourselves. She leaned forward, her gaze intense. Humanity doesn't want to rule the galaxy, Counselor. We just want to ensure no one can ever threaten our existence again. 6 months later, the combined fleets of humanity and the Assembly faced the hegemony's main force at the Battle of Arcturus Gap. Over 10,000 ships engaged in what would later be called the largest space battle in galactic history. Admiral Rice commanded from the UES Reckoning, coordinating the complex dance of ships with the help of advanced AI systems that the Assembly had only recently stopped viewing with horror. Assembly vessels, retrofitted with human phase counter-technology, held the line against the seemingly endless waves of hegemony warships. When the battle was won, nearly a third of the combined fleet lay in ruins. But the hegemony's primary invasion force had been shattered, its hive command ships destroyed by specialized human strike teams using technology developed specifically for that purpose. In the year that followed, joint human assembly task forces systematically eliminated the remaining hegemony outposts throughout known space. The threat that had seemed existential was neutralized through the combination of human innovation and assembly resources. But the galaxy had changed irrevocably. The assembly was no longer the sole power determining the fate of civilizations. Humanity, once exiled and forgotten, now stood as an equal partner in galactic affairs, their technological prowess and military might earning them both respect and lingering fear. 5 years after humanity's return, Admiral Rice, now Supreme Commander of the Joint Defense Force, stood once again in the assembly chamber. The formal ceremony marked the official end of humanity's exile and the beginning of a new era of cooperation. High Counselor Nexer presented her with the seal of the assembly, a symbolic gesture recognizing the United Earth Systems as a full member of the galactic community. But both knew the reality. Humanity no longer needed the assembly's approval or protection. They had forged their own destiny in the darkness beyond the stars. As Reyes accepted the seal, her thoughts turned to the billions of humans who had perished during the early years of exile, to the generations who had lived and died, never seeing Earth's sun again. They had paid the price for the assembly's fear. And though humanity had forgiven, it would never forget. Let this day mark not just peace between our peoples, Reyes proclaimed to the assembled representatives, but a new understanding. No species should fear extinction for being different. No civilization should face exile for its potential. She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of beings from hundreds of worlds. The stars have room enough for all of us, even humanity. The applause that followed was genuine, if somewhat uneasy. For everyone in that chamber understood the unspoken truth. Humanity no longer asked for its place among the stars. It had taken it, and the galaxy was better for it. As Reyes left the chamber, Captain Chen fell into step beside her. "Do you think they understand yet?" he asked quietly. "Understand what?" replied Reyes, though she knew exactly what he meant. That we could have returned centuries ago. That we waited, watched, and chose this moment. Reyes smiled enigmatically. Some of them suspect, the smarter ones, but they'll never say it aloud. And the hegemony? Do you think they suspect they were manipulated? The hegemony served its purpose, said Reyes coldly. They were a genuine threat, Yes, but also an opportunity. Their attack gave us the perfect reason to reveal ourselves on our terms. Chen nodded thoughtfully. The assembly feared us becoming conquerors, so they tried to destroy us. Instead, they forced us to become something far more dangerous. Yes, agreed Reyes as they boarded the shuttle that would return them to the reckoning. They forced us to become survivors. As the shuttle lifted off, Reyes gazed down at the glittering expanse of the assembly capital. Humanity hadn't returned seeking vengeance or domination. They had returned with something far more powerful, the knowledge that no matter what the galaxy threw at them, humans would adapt, endure, and ultimately prevail. The exile had not been humanity's end. It had been their beginning, and the assembly would never forget it again.